Hi, my name is Jackson. I'm 17 years old, and I've logged thousands of hours of my life in a pool. People often tell me I'm crazy for this, and they ask, why would you ever do that? And for the longest time, I gave one of three answers. I said, I want to make the Olympics, I want to win state, or just as simple, I do it to make my parents happy. After reflecting on these responses, though, I sometimes wonder if I've lost the plot, if I'm losing sight of how I define my success. This is something that we as teenagers, young adults, and even seasoned workplace veterans all struggle with. We're all constantly inundated with ideas from social media, our peers, our parents, about what it means to be successful. So, we start losing sight of what truly fulfills us and instead focus on narrowly defined versions of success. These are my lessons from a life in a pool. Swimming taught me how to accept sacrifice. You give up a lot when you dedicate yourself to a sport as demanding as swimming. There were weekends I couldn't commit to, breaks I couldn't take, and events I watched happen from the sidelines. One of the biggest things I had to give up when committing to the sport was an active social life. Like any kid, all I wanted to do was go to my friend's house, play video games, or go to the movies. But instead I found myself at practice or trying to catch up on sleep. Talk about FOMO. So you can imagine, 10-year-old me was not very happy when he would touch the wall and not see a little one next to his name. When I would underperform, I would feel resentment, angry at the fact that I had to give up so much of my time just to miss my goals. Now, does this mean that all of this was for nothing? That these thousands of hours spent in a pool were a waste of time? Of course not. Because once I was able to step back and view sacrifice as something positive, I was able to see that although I didn't win every race, swimming still taught me invaluable lessons. I learned determination, commitment, and dedication, all values I will be able to carry with me through my friendships, the rest of my schooling, and into my eventual professional career. Swimming also taught me how to accept defeat. In life, we're told that failure is not an option. And in a sport as comparative as swimming, it's easy to define a failure from success. Did I win the race? Did I drop time? Did I make the cut? These standards of success are so rigid that I would find myself paralyzed with fear in the beginning of a race. I would stress days before the event, my stomach would hurt, and there were times where quitting felt like a better option than getting up on the block and facing my competitors. So I needed to stop, take a step back, and learn how to accept defeat. You might be saying, isn't he an athlete? Isn't it his job to win? Why would he want to accept defeat? Because to me, accepting defeat became about changing my definition of success. To me, accepting defeat became about taking my opportunities in a pool and using them as growth, as development, and realizing that all of my failures opened up opportunities for growth, feedback, and improvement. And without these moments, I would not be where I am today. So overall, accepting defeat does not mean you love to lose. It just means that you can enjoy something on your own terms. You can grow, you can progress, even without that first place medal. The last thing swimming taught me was to accept change. When we're young, we're often put in a box, usually defined by the sport we play or how well we perform in school. This box can make us feel stuck, trapped in an identity we know doesn't truly encompass who we are as people. I remember one summer, my group of swim friends completely shut me out. They stopped talking to me cold turkey. These are the people I was spending hours of my day with. From bus rides, to meets, to practices, they were my family, and losing that support was devastating. I knew the environment wasn't good for me, and I knew I wanted to leave, but for some reason, I couldn't. I felt trapped on the team because although it wasn't doing it for me anymore, it was the place I had been for 7 years, with coaches I knew, friends I was familiar with, and at the school I would be attending in a few short months. How was I supposed to give up everything I had known about the sport? Everything I was comfortable with? By the end of that summer, though, I ended up switching teams. It was hard, it was scary, but it was also life. I had to recognize that the environment that I was in wasn't good for me anymore. I had to recognize that to grow, I needed to move. Accepting change doesn't mean fleeing every time something is hard or scary or a little difficult. It just means that there are going to be points in life where we realize that to be the best version of ourselves, we need change. So now you all might be saying, thanks for sharing, but what does this have to do with me? Because the pressure that is felt in a race, the pressure to perform, to hit standards, and to meet expectations is the same pressure we all feel today, just in different forms. We feel it in grades and GPAs, likes and comments on our social media posts, trying to find that perfect friend group, or in comparisons we always make. We never ask to make them, but we somehow always feel. The issue is that we start comparing ourselves to someone else's version of success. So, little by little, we start losing sight of what actually fulfills us. We lose the plot. However, life teaches us important lessons, the first of which being accepting sacrifice. You cannot commit yourself to something fully without giving away pieces of yourself to somewhere else. Sometimes it's a mom sacrificing all of her time to take care of her kids. Sometimes it's a student sacrificing their holiday break to study for the ACT. And sometimes it is an athlete giving up long hours and weekends trying to become the best they can be at their sport. The danger isn't in giving away pieces of yourself. It's in giving them away for the wrong reasons. When you sacrifice to keep up with comparisons, to meet standards, to put on a show, you lose pieces of yourself. These pieces of yourself could have been invested into something truly important to you, but you're instead giving them away for someone else. I'm sure many of us are focused or have been focused on getting into an elite university. Getting in is something what you truly, truly want. It's no problem to give up hours studying, doing homework, or taking prep classes. But if getting in is just to prove a point to your classmates, your teachers, and not something you truly want, your sacrifices can make you feel miserable. But when sacrifice is tied to something meaningful, you don't really lose pieces of yourself. You invest them. They come back as determination, growth, and development, all things you can take with you through the rest of your life. However, even when we sacrifice for all of the right reasons, when we choose our commitments carefully, there is always still an element of unknown, something we can't control. That is, defeat. It is inevitable that there will be some point in your life where you spend hours studying for a test, weeks preparing for an interview, or put days' effort into a project, only to open the test and find a grade you know doesn't reflect the work you put in, refresh your email and read a rejection, or just be told your work isn't good enough. In times like these, it's easy to let the outcome define us, because we've been so conditioned to treat defeat like a verdict. A bad grade feels like proof you're not smart enough, a rejection feels like proof you're not capable enough, and a missed opportunity feels final. So, in the face of any event, we start to hesitate. We overanalyze, and all of a sudden, we're only taking risks when there aren't really any risks. However, a life spent in fear of failure rarely leads to growth, because defeat is not a verdict. It is information. The moments that sting the most are also the moments that help us the most, because they open up opportunities that tell us what we can do to change, to become better, and to evolve ourselves into people who we never could have been before. So, when life teaches us to accept defeat, it doesn't mean that we need to be comfortable with where we are, comfortable being knocked down, being told we're not good enough. Accepting defeat in life means that you take what you've been given. You recognize that yes, it did hurt. Yes, I don't really want to try anymore, but I'm going to, because I know I can take away so much from this experience. Because when defeat is tied to outcomes, it feels devastating. But when defeat is tied to growth, perseverance, and changing who you're becoming, it becomes necessary. Necessary to shape who you are and who you're becoming. And sometimes defeat doesn't just teach us how to improve, sometimes it teaches us that we need a change. We don't like change as humans. It's uncomfortable, disrupts what's normal to us, and it puts us in a very vulnerable position. When we're young, we're often asked who we want to be, where we want to go to school, what what job we want to have, where we want to live, before we've even figured that out for ourselves yet, which can make change that much scarier. But growth doesn't work that way. Change is important because it shows us that where we are right now might not be the best place for us. There will be times where a class drains you instead of challenges you. There will be times where a job pays you but doesn't develop you. And it is so important to realize that in these moments, it's okay to step back. It's okay to recognize that yes, this is tough. And yes, I would like change. And the hardest part, of course, isn't in recognizing this. It's in giving yourself that permission to change. It's telling yourself, I know where I am right now isn't doing it for me, so I'm going to leave. Once we've accepted that, we learn growth. We become new, we become changed, and all of a sudden, we're in a place where we can be who we want to be without fear of guidelines. So, overall, defeat shapes us, sacrifice strengthens us, and change transforms us. None of these are signs that you're failing. They're signs that you're succeeding. So, I will leave you with this. If there were no comparisons, no likes, no comments, no social media interaction, and nowhere to prove yourself, would you still choose the path you're on today? Thank you.